This is the journey of the umbrella. This is the stage within the journey of the umbrella that we're going to concentrate on today. This is Sicon approvals. For those of you that have been on this journey with me, you'll know that as we've gone through the journey, not only have we obviously been recording the sessions, but we've also been publishing them as well. So each of the ones which we've already undertaken has its own webinar attached to it. We've already looked at the conception of a product and how it moves through your customer journey. That product for us is the Sicon umbrella. It also denotes that kind of umbrella of our ecosystem. So we started with CRM. We then went on to documents, Sicon projects, Sicon manufacturing, Sicon construction. And effectively, as we're going through that journey, there's a number of different things that happen along the way that somebody else needs permission for. And that's Sicon approvals. There's a number of different modules that we support within the Sicon approvals platform: requisitions, invoices, expenses, timesheets, holidays, HR. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a number of different touch points into that ecosystem. For example, there is touch points to construction-led organization. They will be able to go in and look at projects. They will also be able to go in and effectively approve a valuation against an application. They can plan for planned purchases. This is not just a platform for approvals within those modules. It does so much more than that. The other little unsung hero, which I'm going to have a little look at today with you, is something called Sage Admin. If you're looking for supplier onboarding system, then there is a module inside of approvals which you can make enabled for anybody that has any of the modules. If they buy requisitions, they get Sage Admin. If they buy invoice approvals, they get Sage Admin. And Sage Admin allows us to take 3 specific transactions through an approval process: the creation of a purchase ledger account, the creation of a sales ledger account, and the creation of a stock item. Those 3 things would have their own approval route. You can support it with supporting documentations, particularly for supplier onboarding. It's very handy. And then once approved, it will automatically become a purchase ledger account, for instance. So we're going to look at some of those other things that we do inside of approvals. HR is actually one of my favorites. This is actually one of the solutions which covers so much, which has always been my favorite to talk about. I'm going to concentrate specifically today on the environment that you see here, which is what we would call the browser-based environment. There is also an app for Sicon approvals as well. In the very near future, you will see a new app, the Hub, and it will provide you with a platform for approvals, which is completely the same as what you would be doing inside of the browser-based version. So the functionality will all be there and scaled to a mobile phone and completely online for you. Let's get in and actually look at approvals. So I'm just going to log in as my admin user in here. A couple of things to note as far as approvals is concerned. It is a platform that you can enable users to be able to do what they're configured to do. I can say this particular user could be an invoice approver, but I might have brought invoice approvals, requisitions, and expenses, but I might only enable invoice approvals for a particular user. However, it could also be that that particular user is going to put expenses on, they're going to put a requisition on, and they're going to approve our invoices. And in those circumstances, it's only one license that's required. So it becomes a very, very cost-effective way of enabling that approval structure throughout your business. We've logged in as admin, and as you can see, because it then allows me to be able to navigate to all the different types of users. Delegate access is really important, and one of the things that you would want to be able to see in the user settings is that they can indeed set themselves to out of office. When they do so, they'll be presented with a list of other users with the same delegation of authority as themselves, potentially, that they can choose from to get their notifications while they're absent. What's really key about that is that the system knows it. So if I log in on behalf of another user, so I'm admin and I might log in on behalf of Michelle, or if I am rerouted as the person that's going to pick up those transactions while Michelle is away, then it will actually store that in the approval history. Admin did this on behalf of Michelle, or Chris did this on behalf of Rachel. So that full approval history also means that you'll have compliance, and it also means that the auditors kind of love the system. If you accompany this with Sicon documents as well, so that all of the appropriate documents are then visible back inside of those transactions that will exist inside of Sage, then you have a full document store of all of the appropriate documentation, accompanying documentation that supports that entire approval process. And the auditors don't need to go anywhere else to see it. You don't need to maintain those big, lever arch files that sit in a room in the basement. And if you're using Sicon documents for invoice approvals, HMRC say, if you've got 6 years worth of backup capabilities in your system, off goes the paperwork. We don't need to use it. Okay, so that's out of office. In reality, this is a platform that enables the user to be able to go through the full purchase to pay, expenses, timesheets, everything else, without having to store lots of additional documentation or perform a manual process. The other thing that you'll also see in here is the links to our mobile app for iOS and for Android. They are pre-existing. The apps are there. They do a pretty good job right now. They'll do a better job in the future. There's also two-factor authentication. We adopt that ourselves internally. So when a user logs on, just if you're security conscious, then it will take you through that two-factor authentication with an authenticator of your choice. Let's go in and actually have a little look at some of these modules then. So we're going to log in as a user called Lewis. Lewis doesn't actually have very many permissions at all, but what he can see is everything that he's already done. So in here, he gets those notifications to tell him about things that might need to be approved, things that have been completed, things that have been fully approved, things that have posted to Sage, where there are goods received that need to be done. And those notifications are sent out via email, and you can determine who gets those notifications and at what frequency by user. Let's follow a transaction through. So we're just simply going to go in and create a new requisition. And that new requisition is going to be very much related to our journey of the umbrella. Who provides us with an umbrella? Let's just pop ourselves in here. We're going to do this one for Everest. We're just going to go in and add a stock item. It could also be free text. Now, if I look for an umbrella here, you'll see my Sicon standard umbrella pop up. I have another type of umbrella that I could purchase called the Super Duper umbrella. But as you'll notice, it doesn't appear in my list because Everest don't supply it to me. And I've got this filter by items by supplier switched on. So it just makes navigation really simple and really easy. Lots of other things that you could potentially do. There you can see my images coming through. You'll also notice that our pop-ups from our enhancement pack are also enabled to be visible in here as well. So that stock item note, always buy from preferred supplier, always buy in packs of 10, always put it in a pink box, whatever it might be, is also visible for me. The other thing which I particularly like, very, very quickly, just going to go in and pop that against my Windsor Racecourse project. Again, for those of you that have joined me in this journey, you'll know that that's the project that supply the umbrellas. So we're buying these umbrellas within this phase, within this stage, within this activity, as you can see. So we'll just say it's delivery. And it goes against my project header of materials, which will automatically choose the appropriate nominal. I can also see stock movements if you've got them enabled. For us today, we are indeed going to say save to that. Obviously, I'm going to keep on adding lines into here. If I go in and add a free text line now, you'll notice something that isn't always visible, which is this bit here, populate from catalogue item. That is switched on because we have something in our distribution solution for POP management that gives us supplier catalogues. So if you wants to use a system and they're not using stock, but they would like to upload their supplier catalogue so that the user can choose from it, then if there is a catalogue in existence, so it's just widgets that we buy from Everest, then my widget pops up on the screen. So again, particularly like that one, and it is part of our distribution solution. However, for the purpose of today's exercise, we're not going to have a free text item. I am going to goods receive that Sicon standard umbrella. We can put in some justification. Let's just put in some notes and potentially add a copy of a file, just a Sage logo for me today. That could be a picture of the quote. And again, everything time and date stamped. all of that additional information. I could just save it, come back to it. I could also print it as a quote request. There's a whole section that we can give you on justification and printing of quote requests. Justification might mean that if you have a process that they need to go through, in other words, they need to go and get 5 quotes before they then decide where to purchase it from. Again, we have a solution for it. So these are all touch points for you in terms of requirement gathering. We're going to go in and say save and submit to this particular one. Again, I could come back to it. That's going to create for me a requisition number, which Lewis can then see on its journey. So I obviously only created this for one particular item. As you can see, when we go in and have a little look at this one, it is indeed for my Sicon standard umbrella, but because it's underneath the threshold for self-approval for Lewis, it didn't need to go through the full approval process. It has literally self-approved it and allocated the Sage purchase order number to it. So as you can see, if I go in and print my summary, that could indeed produce my purchase order. Again, little known facts. Producing the purchase order, emailing it off from here, one option. Taking that document into Sage, creating an environment where the guys inside of Sage are the ones that send it out to the supplier using Sicon documents and any supporting documentation. That's also something that we can do. But also another one, which again is little known, is that we can produce our purchase orders from here and automatically email them off on final level of approval. So fully authorized purchase orders automatically sent out the door, emailed off to the supplier. So lots of different options. We're just going to pop ourselves back inside of Sage into my purchase order list, and you will indeed see that we do have our new purchase order for Everest, and there it is. We're just going to pop ourselves in to view it, and you will indeed see that our purchase order also has another tab that gives us where it came from. So the requisition, the fact that it was raised by Lewis, the non-Sage user. When we go in and view the documents, we'll also be able to see the original copy of the quotation that we attached to our requisition. Fabulous. What's going to happen next with that particular purchase order is potentially we're going to match it. And this is where we get into invoice approvals. So invoice approvals, if I go in here and say that I would like to post and record my invoice, at this point in time, there is no goods receiving having been done. So that may be the point at which your customer says, I'm not going to then process that invoice because we do require goods receipting to be done. Very quickly, I am indeed going to just produce that purchase order just so that we can show you the full document store. So there we're going to go in and just say, yep, I'd like to email and archive it. For those of you that have seen this many times, I can't stop talking about Sicon documents. It's a great solution and also has OCR capabilities as well. Mine's going to pop itself into my drafts. There it is with the supporting documentation that went from the stock item as well as the purchase order itself. And that indeed has archived it to my purchase order. Back inside of approvals, my user, Lewis, next thing that's going to happen is he's going to get notification to say you should have goods received this. There is our Everest one sitting at the bottom, which we are indeed going to receive. And we may as well choose our goods receipt note to attach, give it a document number, quantity received. We're just going to receive all. This little button here, final receipt, very interesting one. It just means that if you order 10, got 9, never going to get the other one, we can effectively amend the purchase order that sits inside of Sage. So we're not left with loads of open purchase orders that we're never going to get. So we are indeed going to receive all and save. And the next bit in that process has been achieved from that requisition. That is visible as a transaction trail inside of approvals and obviously visible inside of Sage. So we're just going to pop in and view that purchase order one more time, and you should see that that has indeed been received and all of the supporting documentation is coming into play. The purchase order that we sent out, the quotation that we attached inside of approvals, and now my goods receipt note all visible for us to be able to see. Final bit in that process is that we are going to go in and post and record the invoice. A couple of things that you get with approvals that actually are a little bit of unsung heroes at many of our customers. The detail from the line detail, therefore the narrative, is going to be populated on the invoice from the purchase order because approvals is switched on. If you've got 7 things on a purchase order, 1 invoice that comes in, our system will take all 7 lines and a narrative on all 7 lines, despite the fact that they all might be posted to the same nominal, instead of consolidating it into 1 invoice valued line, allowing your users to go in and actually enter it in across multiple lines if required. Again, we're going to go and post my invoice, obviously having put in a reference number and my goods value. So there's my £9.83, and my one for my VAT, and we will indeed go and post. If there are variances, that's again something else that we can do because approvals is switched on. So a variance line could potentially be created. This particular one, as we know, is going to go to my Windsor Racecourse project. So we can go in and see that level of information as well. It's going to go against materials. It's going to default to the nominal that we would like. And again, that narrative, as I mentioned, the Sicon standard umbrella coming through. Again, you can make the invoice mandatory. So it goes any document, but for me today, of course, it is going to be an invoice of some description. If you're using OCR, we can match that too. So the whole process comes through together. This again is something that you don't have to have, but I just felt that it would be worth showing you as part of this journey. In standard approvals for your requisitions, invoice approvals, which we're on to right now, there are pre-configured approval routes that can be based on a number of different criteria. Things like who the requesting user is, the value, the nominal account, the cost center, and the department combination. Is it over budget? Could I do it by supplier? If I'm using projects, am I going to use the project or the project manager or the project header as the route for approval? They're pre-configured, but this little utility enables me to override the pre-configured approval route and choose what is effectively a non-saved user as to who this invoice needs to go out to for approval. Again, it's an option. Your users don't have to use it. They'll very often use the pre-configured routes, but again, a nice little utility to have, and one that we don't necessarily show all of the time. For me today, I'm not going to choose a different user. I'm just going to let it go, and off it will go and do its thing. Okay, you'll see in here, this is construction-based functionality. So again, we're touching lots of different places. So we could potentially reconcile my invoice to an existing application and subsequent valuation. For the purpose of today's exercise, I'm not going to do that. But what we have now ended up with, as far as my purchase order is concerned, we now have a purchase order which has been fully approved. It's been goods receipted. All of the supporting documentation is there for me to be able to see, and subsequently an invoice came in to match to it. So when we go into the quantities, you can see it has indeed been ordered, received, invoiced, and all of the supporting documentation is there for me to be able to see, including a copy of the invoice. However, this is where invoice approvals comes in. If we just go into the purchase ledger and we just look at our transaction for Everest now, you'll see that it currently sits under the unauthorized flag, preventing it from being paid, and it will not appear on the suggested payment run. And at the moment, it's not sitting against the nominal designated for that invoice. It's sitting against the unauthorized purchases code, where it will sit on the balance sheet until authorized. That invoice has automatically gone out for approval. So back into approvals. And again, the rules on whether or not it goes out for approval. If I was to enter an invoice directly into the purchase ledger, no purchase order number, no purchase order matching required, then potentially invoice goes out for approval as standard. If I enter in an invoice matching to a purchase order and everything matches, I might say doesn't need to be further approved. Purchase order was effectively approved. And now the goods received matches it, invoice doesn't need to be approved. And the system is capable of doing that for you, effectively self-approval based on whether or not it matches or not. Or you might say only needs to be approved if it's outside of a certain tolerance, or in my case, all invoices need to be approved. So we're going to log in as a user called Michelle. And what else does Michelle do as part of invoice approvals? She's got 37 invoices that she needs to approve. The one that we see at the top of the screen is our one for Everest, and we've got the full trail all the way back through. The beauty of the system is that a requisition raised, approved, goods received, and subsequent invoice approved means I have a full audit trail of all of those transactions and supporting documentation inside of approvals. I could, as the invoice approver, edit it. When I say edit it, I could change the nominal, because at the moment I have that opportunity. It's currently sitting in that unauthorized purchases code. I don't have to raise a credit, change it, do anything about it. I could just say wrong nominal as the approver. And again, it's all about the permissions that you give the individual. The original copy of the invoice comes in and is attached here for my user to be able to see. And they're not seeing the unauthorized purchases code. They're seeing exactly where it should post, together with any approval history and budgets. We could approve it from here. We could also go in and actually view the details and see exactly what I've already explained, which is that entire journey all the way through to get to this point. So the original requisition with its full approval history, entered, goods received, fully approved. You can see what I mentioned earlier on. I was logged in as admin, went in on behalf of Lewis to do my goods receiving. So it says this was received by the administrator on behalf of Lewis. Back to my order details, we'll also be able to see in the quantities that there are our goods received, and any supporting documentation is visible at that point. So even when I'm approving the invoice, I can navigate all the way back through the journey of the requisition, subsequent goods receiving, and full approval process, so that I can make an informed decision as to whether or not this invoice does indeed need to be approved. And on approval, it'll either go on to the next level of approval, or it'll simply authorize and update Sage. So we take care of the reversing transaction that removes that query flag. And even we still refer to it in certain places as WAP. So you can see where it's been authorized by the web approvals platform and it ends up in our designated nominal code. We're exactly where we want it to be, with the narrative and the visible documentation there for us to be able to see. If we look at projects, if we go into my Sicon projects, you can then see in here for our wins of aces. Now, the key thing to this is that I raised a requisition that was specifically for our project. So what you're actually seeing in here is the movement of that stock. Upon goods receiving, we automatically issued it to the project. We don't want to double count for it. So it comes in, goes out effectively. So it's issued to my project. If I go in and actually view my project inquiry, that entire process is visible and summarized for me within my project. So your users, your project managers, would be able to see everything that we've just done, very little keying inside of Sage that we've just done. And as you can see, there's my Sicon standard umbrella, not just purchased, but received, invoiced, issued, and therefore all of that goes in here. There's my Sicon standard umbrella issued to my project. So at the point of commitment off the back of our requisition, it will then move itself along that bus. And as you can see, the cost is no longer here. That was the on order value. And as you can see, it's disappeared from my committed and actual here because the cost actually appears here in my issue. Okay, so we could go on and on about that, but what else happens inside of approvals for those project managers? I can see that information inside of Sage, but actually back inside of approvals, if I'm the project manager and I do have access to everything, then I can go in and I can view my projects. I can look at my project list. I can filter it down to my Wins and Racecourse project. We can go into my project inquiry screens. Remember, these are your non-Sage users. These are the guys that want to be able to see this level of detail, but don't require a Sage license or don't need a Sage license, because everything that we've just done is now visible for that user. And remember, this is not an extra module that you need to pay for. If you've got projects, if you purchase projects, you will naturally get this if you purchase any of these other modules. So if we just go in here and look at my expenditure, again, exactly what we have just done coming through so that we can actually see all of that information. So just pop ourselves into our stock and you can see my Sicon standard umbrella coming through as an issued cost. What else can your projects people do inside of approvals? They can obviously view the project, but they can also make some amendments if you need them to. So editing the project, they can go in and they can actually give it a percentage complete as an example. They might change the address. There's not lots of things that we give them the opportunity to do, but there's some. Some of those things are important for your non-Sage users to be able to achieve. Each individual user, by permission, can see the projects that you allow them to be able to see. Let's just pop ourselves back into my Windsor Racecourse one again. Nice and easy, navigation, and you can also go in and amend the project from here as well. Okay, projects, plan purchase, maintain of plan purchases. If you're using projects, maintaining plan purchases, you can also convert your planned purchases to requisitions that then require approval. Really nice little utility. Just while we're here, Sage admin, new customer, new supplier, new stock item. No double keying, no double entry. Supplier onboarding becomes super easy. If they want to create it as a stock item, again, super easy little process of approval, allowing your non-Sage users to request something that needs to be approved before it becomes an entry inside of Sage. So we've looked at invoice approvals. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit more about what you can do in invoice approvals. It isn't just invoice approvals. It's also credit approvals. And it's also payment approval. So when your customers run their suggested payment run, we can also present that payment run for approval. That's the sheet of paper that your director sits down with and he gets his highlighter pen out and he says, pay that one, don't pay that one. We're going to pay them eventually, but we might not have enough money in the bank to be able to do it. So we're going to log in as a user called Harry, and you're going to see in Harry has 42 proposed payments to approve. And that's our big long list of everything. We're just going to pop ourselves into this one here for Corcoran Supplies. And you'll see any supporting invoices, or daffodils in this case, and we'll be able to see our check value. So big long list of everything, looking at the supporting invoices attached via Sicon documents of approved invoices ready to be paid, and deciding whether or not we approve them all to be paid, pay them all, pay none, or select a value that we're willing to pay to. Completely different set of approvals, but part of invoice approvals. Expenses is what I would call a more self-service solution alongside timesheets and holidays. That's where your end users, rather than the processes within the business, really kicks in. So it's all important for them. And they're easy and they're simple. We don't want to make these overcomplicated. It shouldn't be overcomplicated. We use timesheets ourselves internally for the Working Time Directive. We're not that fussed about the number of hours that we spend on different activities from a sales team perspective. And developers now, consultants are slightly different, guys. But in reality, from a timesheet perspective, all I need to do is to record that myself and my team do their standard 40-hour week or whatever it might be and approve that away. It's easy and it's simple and tailored specifically for that. However, if it is more complex than that, and you do actually want to post to individual cost headers within your projects and then take that information in a more refined way, there's a solution for that too. We're going to go back in as Lewis. Lewis is now going to do some more of that sort of self-service stuff. He has access to HR. He can see his details that we hold about him. He can see his information. This lends itself really nicely to being a HR platform because we hold that level of information anyway. We know who Lewis is. We know he's a user that has access to these different departments. We know what his name is, how we contact him, what his date of birth is, when he started work with our organisation. So why not develop that database, which already sits behind approvals, to give us much more of that HR functionality? Again, there's lots of security behind it. So I'm logged in as admin going in on behalf of Lewis. So even if I tried to go into Lewis's self-service for HR at this point, it would say, you can't do that. That's disabled. You're not allowed to do it. Disabled rights to get into Sicon HR is disabled for delegate access. So it's only Lewis that can go in and look at his stuff. And then he'd be able to see things like his absences. He'd be able to see his employment and roles that he's undertaken that we hold about him. He'd be able to go in and look at things like his company policies, his contract, his appraisals, his certifications and training. So it really does lend itself to be that extension to what you already have behind a user. Let's stay in as Lewis and do a couple of things which are a bit more self-service. So we're going to go in and put a quick expense on, the details of which are going to be our test for all of our BPs. So we're going to go in here and we're going to put either an out-of-pocket expense on, corporate credit card expense, or a mileage line. Let's just pop ourselves in and do two of those things. We're going to go in and add an expense line on site with Chris. And for me, I've only got a couple of types set up. Again, we can take you through this in a bit more detail. That's going to determine the nominal code that it posts to and the VAT rate that is applied to it in connection with whether or not I say there's a receipt or not. In goes my £150 for my flight. And of course, I can go in and say save to that, or we can go in and we can attach the copy of the receipt accordingly. So let's just go and do exactly that. For the purpose of today's exercise, my receipt is going to look remarkably like a bunch of lilies just for visual purposes, but that's of course where your users would be going in and entering their own transactions and therefore their receipts. I will also say potentially that it was relating to my project, my Windsor Racecourse project, under the guise of materials or expenses or whatever the header is that's attached to it, and save it so that it will actually appear as a bona fide line at the bottom of the screen, and we can indeed close it. We're going to put our mileage line on as well. You can see the vehicle. We can go in and just, again, I'm not going to put very much information in here at all. I'm simply going to say that this particular mileage line starts here, ends here, home to the office. It's a return journey with a regular commute, no. Calculate the distance. Google Maps does that for me, holds on to that information, calculates the number of miles, multiplies it by my rate that is applied to me for the pence per mile that I'm going to get back when I drive that LK57 DPD. And again, if it's going to our project as an expense, we're going to choose our project, our Windsor Racecourse project, one more time. And we're just simply going to say save to that as well. So now we've got a couple of lines that will go off for approval, receipts which are attached. We're going to do a save and submit, and off it will go. And it sits in Lewis's submitted section, and you can see it's gone to Michelle for approval. She'll get notifications so that she's got something to approve. So we're just going to pop ourselves in and do exactly that. Pop in as Michelle. Michelle's got all of these expenses to approve, one of which is this one here for Lewis. I'm just going to approve it from the front screen, guys, but I want to be able to see what the receipt looks like, so we can pop that onto the screen so that I don't have to navigate too far to go and see all of the receipts which are attached. We indeed are going to say yes to that and approve the selected item. It'll then go on its journey. And if we just look at that, you'll see this is an example For Lewis, for when multiple steps of approval will now kick in. So when Lewis goes to look at his existing expenses, our one here today is still sitting in submitted and has moved on to the next level of approval, which for us is the administrator. So back in as the administrator, where they too are going to approve Lewis's expenses, and they will end up being paid back to Lewis and then presented inside of Sage in the supplier account for Lewis's expenses. Nice and easy. Just open that up just so that you can see. No smoke and mirrors. There's our expense today, 1st of the 8th, 2025. Supporting documentation visible, i.e. receipts. And if we navigate even further than that and we look at the project element of it, you can see both my expenses, the narrative that comes through, visible against my Windsor Racecourse project. And again, we may as well just go in and have a quick look and see them, because all roads are leading back to the same place, and this journey of the umbrella and all of the touch points comes into play. So back into my expenditure, where we'll see Lewis's expenses popping up on the screen, visible for us to see. Sicon Documents also gives us a nice big long list of all of those things which are attached to it. There's Lewis's expenses one more time. Go in and view the documents. You can see the actual document that was raised as a receipt against my approvals transaction in expenses. We looked at requisitions. There's also project requisitions, a way of being able to say, I want 1 of these, 2 of these, 12 of those, and 25 of these, and potentially they're all from different suppliers. We can then raise 1 requisition for approval that will then become multiple requisitions that would potentially be further approved, which would become multiple purchase orders. But it gives us that entity of all of these things were brought for a reason. There's also sales orders as well. We start with a quote, we have sales orders, we have sales order returns. This is all part of the same module. And again, I particularly like it, but in reality, it's whether or not quotes need to be approved. That's normally the way that people use that particular functionality. So quick timesheet from Lewis. Let's just go in and put a quick timesheet on. Again, I'm not going to make mine very complicated. They can become more complicated should you wish them to be. Lewis has done a lot of work this week. As you can see, he's been on holiday to Turkey. This is the holiday module coming into play as well. The 2 things are linked together, but they're not just linked as far as timesheets and holidays are concerned. They're also linked back to my projects. It's also linked back to manufacturing. How does it link back to manufacturing? If Lewis goes on holiday, puts a submission on to say, yes, I'd like to go on holiday, please, it'll then produce an approved holiday request into his calendar. His calendar then appears in his timesheet. His timesheet appears in the project or against his record, and his availability is then reduced. And that availability would then be compared to our demand to manufacture. It is sitting in production, and therefore my capacity to be able to manufacture is reduced. All of these things connected to each other. I'm going to cheat and go forward in time. So I've got a nice blank form. I'm going to create a new one for our Windsor Racecourse. Again, multiple stages, phases, activities, etc., etc. With the guise of labour, we'll just put on our 9 hours for Monday, 5 hours for Tuesday, 4 hours for Wednesday, add in some notes and updating that into the system. At any point in time, they'll be able to see their timesheet as where it is, how many hours they've done per day, how many hours they've done overall, and how many hours they've done by project. Somebody else will be able to see that, and they'll also be able to see whether or not it's been approved or not. So as I go to submit that, it will then go into a status of waiting for Michelle. And of course, same principle applies. Michelle then gets notification to say, you've got timesheets to approve. You've got a few timesheets to approve, as you can see. There's our 18 hours compared to our contracted hours. Again, super simple. We're going to say yes to that. And again, we're just going to pop ourselves back in as Lewis, just so that we can see that current timesheet one more time. And you'll see it's where it's gone on to that second level of approval. Hover over that, you can see it says this is step 2 in the approval route. So Harry now gets that to approve. There's my timesheet for Harry to approve. And the end result of that is that it will post to my project as a cost for Lewis's time. So again, one more time, back into Sage, bringing into view everything that we've just done through the approvals process. And there's probably more to show you. Back into our project. Again, you can see this inside of approvals if we really wanted to, but we're just going to look at our timesheets where you'll see Lewis's time coming in. This is a little bit of an interesting one as well. You don't see this as Lewis's time. I've got a setting switched on inside of projects which actually hides the username. People are quite sensitive about that. Don't want other people seeing what that person's cost rate is potentially. So I've deliberately switched that off. And as you can see, Lewis's time is there and present for us to see.